please welcome the CEO of Intrepid Travel, James Thornton, in conversation with Skift global tourism reporter, Lebawit Girma.
Welcome, James. I'm so thrilled to have you here today and kick off our Design the Future Summit with a sustainable tourism leader such as yourself. So we're going to jump right in. Now, as you know, we've almost reached 2 years of pandemic.
Thanks for reminding us, Lily.
Yes, and there's been so much discussion and many initiatives that have come up with regards to climate, inclusivity, sustainability. In your view, is travel really building back better? And feel free to expand.
Yeah. No, great question, Lily. And hi, everyone. Thanks. It's great to be with you all today. Are we really building back better? I think there's more and more focus on wanting to build back better, and lots of great rhetoric that's flying around. And I think we're seeing, some positive steps. I think, this year has kind of felt like a watershed moment. We've had more than 400 travel organizations have declared a climate emergency. And I think that's on the fact that, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report earlier this year was a real wake-up call for the world that we need to take urgent action on climate change now, and that we've got a really small window to do so. We've got the Glasgow Declaration that came out of COP26. So I think we're seeing some small positive steps from organizations. I think we're also seeing changed expectations, though, from travelers too. There was a Booking.com did an annual sustainability index, and that had some pretty powerful stats that I think like 83% of travelers think sustainable travel is vital. 61% are saying the pandemic has made them want to travel more sustainably in the future. And almost half are saying that they still believe that in 2021, though, the travel companies are not doing enough, and that there aren't enough sustainable travel options out there. So I think there's desire. I think there's increasing consumer demand, but I think the proof is going to be in the pudding that as we start to hopefully move more considerably into 2022, whether companies really will provide these sustainable travel options, whether they really will have taken material actions, and critically whether consumers will actually back up what they're saying in the sentiment that they're putting into surveys, that actually they want to buy from truly sustainable companies. And that's going to be interesting to see when we can travel back properly.
Okay, so I sense some optimism, but also sort of cautious. So you spoke about the Glasgow Declaration, which I'm glad, because that's what I was getting to next, which is climate change. Over 300 stakeholders signed the Glasgow Declaration. There seems to be more unified, action around that. What are you seeing travel companies doing, and where are they not advancing? Where is tourism not advancing when it comes to climate?
I think the things you're starting to get travel companies do is recognize that they need to go on the journey to do probably 5 key things. There are 5 key things that if you're going to take steps on the climate journey, you've got to get your head around. The first thing you've got to do is you've got to be able to measure what you're doing. If you can't measure, you've no idea what you're going to change. So that is the first and kind of easiest step that every travel company should be doing. The second thing is then taking the physical actions to decarbonize your travel business. And, I don't think anyone who's early on in this journey should think that they're going to go from 0 to 100 in 5 seconds. It's got to be a step-by-step approach. Intrepid's been carbon neutral since 2010. That's fine 11 years ago, but it sure as heck isn't good enough today as we're heading towards 2022. So, removing more carbon intensive activities from trips while not harming the customer experience. So in Intrepid's case, we're removing the flight component for flights that are less than an hour in duration, and then adding in a local travel component which is a lower carbon impact. The third thing companies have got to do is regenerate. The fourth thing they've got to do is collaborate. And the fifth thing they do is got to finance it, actually put some physical, tangible dollars towards making this happen. So I think every single company wants to be trying to take these steps around this area. And to be honest, having more collaboration and knowledge sharing, because it is a bit of an existential crisis. Like, if we don't all get it right together, there isn't going to be a tourism industry. And I've said this a few times, particularly 18 months ago. The travel industry was been holding out for a vaccine, effectively, to get the world moving again.
Right.
There's no vaccine for climate change. So if we don't take the action now, we're not going to be able to have a magic trick in 10, 15, 20 years that we can suddenly flick a switch and some very capable scientists will save us, because it'll be too late by then.
Right. So we do need more than 400 something signatories to make
Sure.
this commitment. Do you think that will happen? And I mean, what are some innovative ways to get them on board?
Well, the most powerful way to get people on board is for customers to be choosing to book with sustainable travel companies, and customers demanding it from their companies of which they're booking with. And Intrepid did double in the 4 years leading up to COVID, and I can't help but think some of that is because of the stance that we did take when it came to the sustainability agenda, in terms of being, removing carbon from our trips, in terms of, standing for a whole series of things. And I think we're starting to see consumers, particularly younger consumers, they want to buy from and they want to work for companies, I believe, that actually stand for something.
Right.
So that's going to be the key crux, isn't it? If we're starting to see customers not buy from companies that aren't taking steps forward, that's going to be a big game changer. The second thing I think, Lily, is that at some point, is government going to ultimately come in with, a heavy hand and say, well, actually, we're going to start to impose more significant taxation onto certain carbon intensive industries, because again, that's going to force change too. But yeah, the most powerful one is hopefully that customer agenda, and customers choosing to they have the power of the dollar, and having that most influence.
So with Intrepid Travel, I mean, you've been a trailblazer as far as, low carbon footprint and locally led tours and immersive experiences. But even then, even so, since COVID, you've also found new ways of offering new experiences to your consumers, and you're partnering, for example, with the Meat Network, which is an environmental nonprofit network, around conservation areas, to then design trips. I mean, what's been the process at Intrepid of scaling your model?
I think the key thing for us in terms of scaling the model, Intrepid's traditionally had the approach of taking customers from, let's call them Western markets, so US, Canada, UK, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, to go and see the world. What the thing that we quickly realized as the pandemic was hitting is that actually for a period of time, travel is going to need to be much more localized, because it will have to be. And I think the second thing is also it may be forced to be, because of the issues of climate change that I was talking to just previously. Is it going to become more socially unacceptable for your 1 week holiday to jump on a flight from New York and just head to Japan for a week? Is that going to be what customers will continue to do going forward 2-3 times a year, or are they actually going to be forced to travel more locally? So I think one of the real focuses Intrepid has had over the course of the last nearly 2 years now is to develop a wide range of local travel experiences, so we can actually show the best of a destination to a customer within their home destination. So I think 82% of all travel spend in America is spent on domestic travel experiences, and yet it's an area of the world that Intrepid just hadn't played in previously. So when you're looking at trends around the pandemic, and you're looking at trends around climate change in the more medium to long term, I think more and more customers are going to be wanting to travel and have more localized, authentic experiences within their own backyard. And, take the US as a classic example. There's some fantastic ways to get out, get under the skin of the destination, have a couple of indigenous experiences, try some local food, meet the local people, get out into nature without actually having to leave the country.
And has it been difficult sort of scaling for you in terms of your offerings? How long does it take to establish all of these?
Honestly, no, it hasn't been too hard. I mean, we've just launched 38 new trips in the US. So that's taken our range from, we only had 19 trips in the US previously, added 38, we've now got 57. Fundamentally, Intrepid is a tour operator, and we have our own destination management companies all over the world. So we're taking the same approach that we have in Peru or in Kenya or in Morocco, and applying the same thing to the US. So no, I don't think it's necessarily hard, but you do have to search out and find those more authentic experiences that people are going to want to have in their own backyards.
So scaling what works isn't that hard. I mean, if obviously it's a very competitive, tour operator is a very competitive area, as is any part of the tourism chain. But so, in the same way that businesses are learning from each other as far as climate goes, I mean, there are lessons there for tour operators to be more sustainable by looking at what others are doing.
Well, I think so. Again, I'm not trying to draw on the Intrepid experience, but we have released our, how to decarbonize your business 10-step guide. You go on our website, you download it, and you can go and take it away. And it's been downloaded more than 250 times, which is fantastic. So, we really hope we are sharing the experiences Intrepid has had over the course of that 32-year journey, and particularly over the last 15 years when we've really been focusing on the climate agenda, and hopefully sharing that knowledge. And that's pretty important that we are. I think trying to support the sector and each other as much as we possibly can, because sure, we want to be, commercially successful and we want to win and be great, but fundamentally the tourism industry has got to exist beyond just Intrepid, and there's got to be fantastic experiences for customers, and that's why we've got to take the sustainability agenda so much more seriously than many companies have been previously.
So a lot of what you offer at Intrepid Travel could be described as community-based tourism. How do we make that kind of tourism that's community-led more mainstream?
Well, I think the first point is the starting point's always got to be listening to the communities themselves and engaging with them and understanding what the communities want to achieve or what they expect from tourism. You wouldn't believe how many companies you see just go in there and say, this is the way we run it in our organization and this is what you will do, without having any engagement with the local community themselves. I think capacity building with both supply and demand is really important. For community-led experiences to become more mainstream, there needs to be real demand and commercial paths to be able to market and grow. And there needs to be a pathway to commercialization. So there needs to be more community involvement in tourism first. And then we work on the demand side and connect the community with commercial businesses like Intrepid or others. I think partnerships are critically important. Partnerships about sharing expertise are really powerful. In Australia, we spend a lot of time focused on reconciliation with First Nations Australians, and it's one aspect where travel can make a really big impact. But, Intrepid is not an Aboriginal-owned business, and we don't necessarily have those connections in communities. So we've got to work with partners, we've got to work with advisors who are able to establish relationships and build trust and start to understand what communities want to try and understand. And, like you talked to earlier, Lily, with meat,
Yes.
Our partnership with meat in Croatia and Crete, trips are to we're taking trips to little kind of visited regions of the Mediterranean. So this will hopefully benefit local communities who actually deliver the product and helps to address issues of over-tourism, we hope to.
Right. And what about areas in the Mediterranean, which I think is probably more, probably not as complicated to establish relationships. What about areas like South America, where you offer tours? I mean, what are some of the roadblocks that you often encounter in trying to build up there?
I think the roadblock sometimes you get is, and I think Intrepid's made this error in the past, Lily, is often you can go into a destination, might be in the Sacred Valley, for example, and you start to work with one family or one kind of part of the community. And what you then start to do is bring, we take a lot of customers to Peru, or we used to take a lot of customers to Peru every single year. Suddenly you've got groups kind of coming, and an average group size of 10 people, but still 10 people coming almost every single day into just one part of the community, one family. You then start to get a disproportionate distribution of income, which creates issues within the community itself. So one of the things we've learned, and we started doing this in Delhi, for example, is, our home cooked Delhi cooking schools, we'd actually get 10 to 12 partners, and then we can get the share of the income around different families rather than get disproportionate income into just one family. That's obviously one of the challenges that you've got to try and manage through as you're taking more and more customers through.
Very interesting. So speaking of communities and inclusivity, since the pandemic, tourism boards in particular have faced increased pressure, I guess, and realized that they need to not just market to their own residents, but also just speak to them more and collaborate with them more and get, they've been launching or currently even drafting, particularly in the US, sustainable tourism management plans, running resident sentiment surveys. And there's also talk of a social license to operate, businesses now having more and more to feel out, what it's like in the community. Social reputation is important also, now has more increased weight. Do you see this tendency continuing in tourism as far as it being even more under scrutiny? And how can tourism avoid being under attack and address some of these inequities in a more innovative way in the future?
Well, we're definitely seeing it pre-pandemic, weren't we? You saw a destination like Amsterdam for the first time not be measured on, I think the tourism board was not measured on visitors coming in, but quality of the visitor and the local experience in destination. And so for me, I think the key metrics the key thing that's got to change is destinations increasingly understand, I think, that success isn't necessarily only measured by arrival numbers. And that's got to be the key change. It's got to be the key measure of success should be the customer enjoyment within the destination and the local enjoyment and benefit within the destination. And I think if we can get those two as the critical measures for destination management companies or tourism management companies or state tourism boards, that's going to really help put tourism in the position to be able to build back better. But for that to happen, I think we've got to, a bit like I was saying just previously, we've got to understand the community perspective. We've got to engage the community, and you've got to hear and understand their needs. It's just so kind of critical. It sounds like a no-brainer, but it's so critical. We've got to ensure the plan is always underpinned by quality experiences, which create more value for local people, more value for the customer, but also create, that richer experience for visitors into a destination.
Speaking of the metrics, I mean, and I'm glad you brought that up because that was actually my next question. I mean, yes, as far as the DMOs, but the metrics are also sort of, run by, I want to say, or really established by groups such as, the World Travel and Tourism Council, the United Nations World Tourism Organization, which, have considerable influence and have been driving the narrative of GDP and arrival numbers for many, many years, and it doesn't seem to have stopped. So how do we get those groups to listen and to rethink tourism metrics in a way that also includes the economic side, but is broader? I mean, where's the? Do we need more advocacy around that? I mean,
we need more. Well, we definitely need more advocacy, Lily, because I reckon if we don't do something about it, tourism is going to become a poster child of something very negative. And we saw that pre-pandemic. You saw cruise ships going into Venice, tourists flocking through Barcelona. I wasn't, wanting to rush to a Barcelona or a Venice pre-pandemic. And yet you then see kind of for the first time during the pandemic, sea life returning to the canals in Venice. You're being able to see the mountains of the Himalayas from villages in India and Nepal. So I think if those governing bodies that you talk to don't start to change the rhetoric and do continue down this holus bolus line of GDP being the only measure of success and growth in visitor numbers being the only measure of success, I think you're going to find the tourism industry is going to get attacked pretty strongly in terms of the media. And as much as companies can start to go on about the positive impact that comes as a result of visiting a destination, when you're pulling a cruise ship into port and the only money that the people on the ship are actually spending is to buy an ice cream in a destination, it just fundamentally doesn't stack up. That kind of give and take equation isn't there. So that's why I think the metrics are going to have to change to this, ensuring the plan is underpinned around the customer experience and the value is there for the local people, but also a richer experience for the visitors themselves. And I think we've seen it in some destinations. I think if you think to destinations, I think they've actually done a good job. Costa Rica historically has done a good job. We've seen Scotland do a good job. They're really talking about that holistic approach of the measurement of the environmental impact of tourism and trying to encourage tourism that has a lighter physical impact and more benefit of money into the local communities themselves. So I think travel will need to do it. Otherwise, it will find itself under the attack of the global media.
Right. I agree with you. Looking ahead at the future of tourism, there have been so many, solutions. I mean, is regenerative tourism the key here? Is it the way to transform mindsets?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, in the years ahead, the pandemic and the impacts of the pandemic they're going to remain with us, aren't they? And so, regenerative tourism is absolutely going to be playing a role. I think the decade ahead, to be honest, is just firmly going to be centered around climate change and what action the world is going to take. And to be honest, the next decade is going to set us on a trajectory for the next 40 years. And the clock is properly ticking around. And that's governments, that's destinations, that's businesses, that's consumers. And so, yes, if we can find and build more regenerative tourism experiences, then that's absolutely got to be a positive. But we need to somehow, Lily, take this notion that sustainable tourism or regenerative tourism is this kind of nice niche on the side of the industry. And I keep using the analogy of a supermarket. You know, when you go to the supermarket, there's a health food aisle, right? But that gives the implication that all the other food in the supermarket is not healthy. And what we need to find is, and that's the same for tourism. It's like, hang on a minute, what's this whole sustainable tourism or regenerative travel thing that's on the side? This needs to become the norm. This needs to be the way that every travel company is building their experiences around. Because if it isn't, then it's having a destructive impact. And, you know, we know that the clock is ticking and we've got to take action.
Right, absolutely. So as far as Intrepid Travel goes, what's top of mind for you going into 2022 and the next sort of 2 years, given that we're still living under much uncertainty?
Yeah, look, number one priority for Intrepid right now is vaccine inequity. It's a huge issue around the world. What is it? I saw a stat yesterday, 44% of the world has still not had one vaccine or access to one vaccine. We saw the impacts of it in the last week, haven't we? It's something you've been championing. I think Intrepid's hopefully championed it since we made it mandatory for all of our trips to require you to be double vaccinated from the 1st September. You know, variants are going to continue to emerge. And unfortunately, the pandemic's highlighted just how unequal the world is and how differently people have experienced COVID-19. And the brutal and honest truth is that travel cannot resume equally if not everyone has access to vaccines.
And speaking of that, I mean, that's all part of inequities and travel playing a bigger role in solving the inequities in their backyard, lest that the industry come under attack. So why have we not seen the needle move in terms of advocacy from travel as far as vaccines go, in your opinion?
I don't know, Lily. It's kind of people often kind of shield behind, well, you know, the kind of local legislation is this or the government legislation is that. You know, saw something, was it Disney the other day still, I think, haven't quite made it mandatory around vaccinations going to a destination. Like, you're going to a theme park, you're getting on rides with people, you're having these intimate interactions with people. God, if ever there was a time that you had to be mandatory vaccinated to go into an experience, surely it's a Disney theme park. And for me, it's about leadership. You know, you just got to get out and you've got to make these calls to do what you believe is the right thing. And look, when Intrepid made this call around mandatory vaccination, don't get me wrong, we got attacked. So what we found is that kind of 85% of people love Intrepid even more, and we get even more kind of customer advocacy, if you like. But then on the other hand, we get 10-15% of people who get really fierce. It's not our place. We shouldn't have a view on it. Well, I'm sorry, I'm the CEO of the company, and I have absolute support from our board. And if we decide we're going to make a call that we really believe in, that it is our place. And honestly, if people don't like that, then they shouldn't travel with Intrepid, and that's absolutely fine. But for me, it's about leadership, because it's the right thing to do to protect our people, to protect our leaders, to protect our communities that we're going in, and protect your families. So for me, it's a leadership issue.
Hopefully we'll see a change in that, in terms of travel leading in that direction. But
yeah, I really hope so.
And overall, is travel returning to its old habits in 2022 or no?
I think you'll see a bit of both, to be honest, Lily. I think, I still kind of worry about this. You know, I'm here in the UK stuck because of having COVID at the moment. And, you know, on the TV, you see some of the companies, the bigger companies, starting to re-advertise again. And you look at the experiences and it's kind of back into this, you know, very price point led. And I worry that there will be some old habits. But then, you know, conversely, I am optimistic when you see that kind of Booking.com Sustainability Index survey. It does show that there is intent there. I think what travel companies need to really work on, Lily, and it's something we've done quite a lot of work on at Intrepid, there shouldn't be an association that sustainability costs money. I think there's often a negative perception, right?
Yes.
That if I want to travel sustainably, it's because it's going to cost me extra money to do so, and therefore I'm paying for it. And I keep saying one of the secrets to success at Intrepid is our product, actually, we probably keep a better value proposition because of the methodology of the way in which we travel, of predominantly using local transport. that doesn't come at a more expensive cost. You can still travel, sustainably. So that's the key messaging the travel industry needs to get out. You can travel sustainably. It's not going to come at an extra cost or an expense.
That's a great place to wrap up. Thank you so much, James, for that message and for your insights today. It's really great having you back here, and all the best in the next year.
Thanks, Lily.